The red light blinked on. The studio went silent. Cameras slid in like hawks. A live banner flashed. 2028. The fight ahead. Governor Gavin Newsom smiled into the lens. "I'll be president in 2028, he said, voice steady. "And some people like Senator John Kennedy will answer for what they've done." A low gasp moved through the room. John Kennedy didn't flinch. He stood with his hands folded, calm as a southern pond. A producer counted down on her fingers. 4-3. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should. In the front row, a single mother named Carla squeezed her folded bills in her pocket. Next to her, a veteran Marcus twisted his service ring. A teacher, Elena, held her breath. Newsom leaned forward. "Worst senator in American history," he said. "Outdated, incompetent, and hiding behind old ways." Kennedy blinked once, twice. He looked at the audience, not the camera. He saw faces, not angles. The host turned to him. "Senator Kennedy, your response." Kennedy took a single step closer to the podium. "Before I answer," he said softly, in that warm Louisiana drawl, "I want to talk to the people who aren't on a stage tonight." And the room leaned in. Carla Kennedy said, eyes kind, "You're raising kids alone, working 2 jobs, but the costs keep rising. Your letter told me about the power bills that leave nothing for the kids' school supplies. You asked why the help feels so far away." Carla looked down at her hands. Marcus Kennedy went on. "You served our nation, came home to rebuild, but the streets are tougher now and veteran support gets lost in the shuffle. You shared how folks like you wait for promises that never show." Marcus blinked back emotion. Elena Kennedy said, "You teach our children every day. You stay late because some kids need that safe space, but the classrooms are underfunded and the challenges mount. You wrote about worrying if they'll get a fair shot." The studio shifted. Viewers at home felt a heaviness in their chest. Kennedy finally turned to Newsom. "Governor, you're clever, you're polished. But leadership isn't a headline or a bold claim. It's showing up when nobody's filming." Newsom laughed under his breath. "You're dodging," he said. "No achievements, just tales. You and your backward ideas, irrelevant, unworthy." Kennedy didn't raise his voice. "My work is quiet," he said. "But the people I serve are not quiet in my heart." The host swallowed. "Senator, your direct reply." Kennedy opened a thin folder papers worn at the edges. "These are letters," he said. "Not from pundits, from our people. They don't need theater. They need help." He closed the folder and looked straight into the lens, through it, into living rooms. "Governor Kennedy said you're auditioning for a new job while your current one still needs you." He paused. The room held its breath. Then he gave the one sentence that flipped the air. "If you can't bring light to California for one quiet week without a camera keeping the power on the streets safe and families feeling seen, then how do you dare dream of the White House silence?" Then a ripple. Carla's eyes watered. Marcus pressed a hand to his mouth. Elena nodded, slow and full. Newsom's smile thinned. He reached for notes and found none that fit. The host glanced at the clock, then at the control room. Phones lit up on the studio floor as messages poured in from viewers. Kennedy didn't gloat. He lowered his gaze. "This isn't about winning a line," he said softly. "It's about winning back trust." The camera pushed in. Somewhere a child watched next to her mother and whispered, "He sounds like he means it." The cameras cut to Governor Newsom. He leaned forward, voice sharp. "Let me be clear," he said. "I will be president in 2028. And when I am John Kennedy won't just be out of a job, he'll be answering for his failures. The audience shifted uncomfortably. A teacher in the back shook her head. The words didn't sound like confidence. They sounded like a threat. Newsom smirked. You've done nothing as senator except bow to the past. You're the weakest voice in our nation's history. He jabbed a finger toward Kennedy. America deserves a leader, not a relic. Kennedy's jaw tightened. The host tried to move the conversation, but Kennedy raised a hand gently. No, he said softly. Let's stay here. The red light above the camera flickered. Viewers across the country leaned closer to their screens. Newsom sat back, certain he had landed a knockout blow. But the silence that followed wasn't for him. It belonged to Kennedy because everyone could sense something was coming. And then Kennedy spoke not with fire, but with a voice calm enough to make even the studio lights feel dim. Kennedy stepped forward. His hand rested on the lectern. Steady. His eyes weren't on Newsom. They were on the people. Governor, he began, you mock me. You call me outdated. But weakness isn't measured in insults. It's measured in what we leave behind for the people who trust us. He turned to the audience. California trusted you. And what happened? The highest grocery prices. Families paying more for gas and electricity than anywhere else in America. Veterans men who fought for us sleeping under bridges while billions vanish in paperwork. The audience stirred. Carla, the single mother, covered her mouth. Kennedy's voice deepened. Families in L.A. couldn't drink their water for weeks. Whole neighborhoods are ruled by crime. Parents are afraid to let their children play outside. These aren't statistics, Governor. They're stories. They're lives. Newsom shifted in his chair, the smirk fading. Kennedy leaned closer. You say you'll be president, sir. You've abandoned your post before finishing your shift. California doesn't need a dreamer of higher office. They need a governor who still remembers them. The silence was suffocating. The camera captured Newsom blinking rapidly. For the first time, he didn't look untouchable. Kennedy didn't stop there. He looked directly into the lens. Millions of Americans watching at home felt as though he was speaking to them alone. Governor Kennedy said his words slow, clear, almost surgical. If you can't bring light to California, keeping the lights on the streets secure, and governance honest, what makes you think you can lead a nation? The words cracked like thunder. A hush fell over the studio. Marcus, the veteran, wiped at his eyes. Elena, the teacher, whispered under her breath, That's it. That's the truth. Newsom tried to respond, but the weight of the moment crushed his voice into a stumble. His hand fluttered to his notes, but every line he had written suddenly felt small, like paper boats in a storm. Kennedy didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He stood tall, steady, almost solemn. America deserves more than speeches. It deserves leaders who show up not for themselves, but for the people who can't afford to be forgotten. The crowd erupted not in cheers, but in raw, thunderous applause that shook the stage. Newsom sat frozen. For the first time, he looked less like a future president and more like a man who had just been told a truth too heavy to carry. The clash didn't stay in the studio. Within minutes, phones buzzed across America. Every network cut to the fiery moment. Clips of Kennedy's sentence, "If you can't bring light to California, how do you dare dream of the White House?" spread like wildfire. On the streets of Sacramento, people huddled in coffee shops, replaying the video on their phones. Some nodded in silence. Others whispered, "Finally, someone said it." At a gas station in Fresno, a single mother named Sophia wiped her eyes as she filled her car. "I thought no one in Washington saw us," she murmured. But Kennedy just did. Meanwhile, Newsom's campaign staff scrambled behind closed doors. His advisors hissed at one another, arguing about damage control. But nothing they scripted could erase the raw truth Kennedy had laid bare. In a classroom in Louisiana, a group of high schoolers debated the moment. One boy stood up and said, "I don't know much about politics." But Kennedy talked like a dad, not a politician. The room fell quiet. By nightfall, the clash wasn't just a story. It was a storm, and America was already caught in it. In Los Angeles, the Ramirez family sat in their dimly lit living room. The father, a construction worker, shook his head as Newsom's smirk replayed on the TV. "He doesn't know us," he said softly. His teenage daughter leaned forward. "But Kennedy," he looked like he cared, like he's listening. Across the country in Texas, a veteran group watched together. One man leaning on his cane whispered when he spoke about forgotten vets, "I felt seen for the first time." Tears rolled silently down his face. In New York, a widow who had lost her husband to rising crime played Kennedy's words over and over. "He's not yelling. He's telling the truth." She pressed her wedding band to her lips. The divide between parties between states seemed to melt just for a moment. People from every corner felt something different. A leader who didn't perform for applause, but stood for the unseen. Newsom's mockery now echoed as arrogance. Kennedy's calm rebuttal resonated like a hymn of accountability. The clash had left scars, but those scars told America something real. Truth can sting, but it can also heal. By morning, polls flashed across headlines. Newsom falls after live clash. Kennedy rises as voice of the people. Anchors debated if the moment had ended Newsom's 2028 dream before it began. On the streets of San Francisco, some defended their governor. But even there, whispers grew. Shop owners asked, "Why does he talk about 2028 when we can't afford next week?" Newsom held a press conference. Cameras flashed. He raised his chin and tried to sound unshaken. "This is politics," he said. The senator twisted, numbers, twisted stories, but his voice cracked, and America saw it. Meanwhile, Kennedy gave no press statement. He simply returned to his office and attended a quiet meeting with families of fallen officers. Cameras weren't invited. A reporter waiting outside asked one mother what Kennedy had said. Her eyes filled with tears. "He told me my son's sacrifice mattered," she whispered. "He didn't talk like a senator. He talked like a father." The silence after her words was louder than any headline. Newsom had spoken to cameras. Kennedy had spoken to souls. And the difference was beginning to bury Newsom alive. The office in Louisiana was quiet that night, but Kennedy was far from idle. He watched the replay of Newsom's clash with him. His jaw tightened, then softened into a thoughtful nod. He called for an aide. "Get me in touch with those folks from the letters tomorrow. No cameras, just real talk." By sunrise, Kennedy sat across from everyday people listening to their stories. It wasn't about winning, it's about truth. People are tired of leaders who pretend. The aide studied him silent. Finally, he said, "Keep being that voice. The people need it." Across the country, headlines exploded. Did John Kennedy just redefine leadership? But what Americans saw was something rare. A senator standing tall on principle. The message was clear. John Kennedy wasn't just responding, he was leading. And that realization sent shivers through Newsom's camp. In Sacramento, Newsom's advisors gathered around a long table. Charts, polls, and notes covered the surface. The numbers were brutal. His approval rating in California had dropped by 10 points overnight. "He humiliated you," one aide whispered. Newsom slammed his fist on the table. No, I'll hit back harder. I'll remind America who Kennedy really is, an outdated follower. But when he stepped in front of the cameras again, his words rang hollow. He tried to paint Kennedy as a relic, but Americans had already seen the truth with their own eyes. The more he attacked, the smaller he looked. Meanwhile, clips of Kennedy's calm rebuttal played on loop across social media. Memes spread not mocking Kennedy, but mocking Newsom. One showed a crumbling California flag with the caption, "Fix this first." Even Californians who once defended their governor began to whisper in barbershops, diners, and classrooms. One question kept coming up. If he can't take care of us, how can he take care of America? For the first time, Gavin Newsom looked not like a rising star, but a man already falling. The clash had turned into something deeper than politics. It wasn't about debates or polls anymore. It was about pain. In Bakersfield, a mother who lost her home in wildfires sat with her daughter, watching Kennedy's words replay. Tears streamed down her face. Finally, someone said what we've been screaming for years. In Louisiana, a factory worker who lost his job to regulations whispered to his wife. That man told the truth, and it hurt, but it was the truth. Churches replayed the clip not as politics, but as a lesson in accountability. Pastors said leaders who forget their people have no future. Congregations wept, not just for California, but for the nation. Kennedy never gloated. He didn't run victory laps. He simply kept quiet, attending meetings, visiting families, and proving that his words matched his actions. Newsom, on the other hand, grew louder, angrier, more desperate. The harder he tried to fight back, the more people turned away. And across America, one truth settled deep in every heart. Sometimes the most powerful words are the ones that hold a mirror to failure. The fallout hit like a southern storm rolling in, slow but sure. By the time the studio lights dimmed, social media was ablaze with Kennedy's words, that piercing line, "If you can't bring light to California, how do you dare dream of the White House?" racking up millions of views in hours. Folks shared clips with captions like "Finally Truth Spoken Plain" and "Kennedy Gets It" hashtags trending nationwide, hashtag Kennedy for the people. Fix California first. In living rooms from coast to coast, people paused their evenings replaying the moment, feeling a spark of something real amid the usual noise. A retiree in Florida messaged her grandkids, "This is what we've been missing, someone who talks to us, not at us." College kids in Chicago debated in dorms, one saying Newsom's all flash, Kennedy's substance. The buzz grew organic, unforced like wildfire in dry grass. Newsom, sensing the tide turning, didn't waste time. He called an emergency presser in Sacramento, striding to the podium under harsh flashes, his face set in determination. This was a cheap shot, he declared, voice clipped and confident. Senator Kennedy twists facts to score points. He's out of touch with progress, clinging to yesterday's playbook. He's a folksy relic from Louisiana, peddling nostalgia, while I build the future. But as he spoke, a new clip emerged from the debate aftermath, one where Newsom, off mic but caught on camera, dismissed a reporter's question about rising costs as just more complaining from folks who don't see the big picture. The internet pounced that snippet, exploding like dry tinder shared with fury under tags like hashtag not complaining and hashtag Newsom out of touch. Viewers fumed, how dare he call our struggles whining, and polls dipped sharper, his approval in California sliding like sand through fingers. A factory worker in Ohio tweeted, "My bills ain't complaints, they're reality," and Kennedy called it out. Single parents in Atlanta formed online groups sharing stories of hardship, echoing Kennedy's letters with their own. The backlash built wave after wave, as Newsom's words boomeranged, painting him as aloof elite, disconnected from the grind. His team scrambled, drafting apologies that never came, advisors whispering, "This could sink us." Meanwhile, Kennedy steered clear of the frenzy. No victory laps, no TV spots. Instead, he slipped away to a modest neighborhood in rural Louisiana, the kind of place where porches sag under years and folks gather at dusk to swap stories. No entourage, just him, in a simple button-down, knocking on doors unannounced. At one weathered home, he sat with a veteran named Leroy, a man with calloused hands and a Purple Heart pinned to his wall, listening as Leroy spoke of delayed benefits and nights haunted by memories. Kennedy leaned in, notebook in hand, jotting every detail without interruption. "I hear you," he said softly, that drawl wrapping around the words like a comforting arm. "We'll push for that aid, real change, not just talk." Leroy's eyes misted. No politician had ever sat there like that, like a neighbor dropping by. They talked for hours, Kennedy asking about Leroy's family, his service days turning policy into personal. Next door, Kennedy met Ms. Harper, a teacher juggling classes in an underfunded school. Her voice weary as she described kids showing up hungry. Textbooks outdated, and dreams deferred. He nodded, asking questions that showed he'd read her letter from months back. "You're the backbone," he told her. "Let's get resources flowing. I'll follow up personally." Ms. Harper hugged him at the door, whispering, "You make me believe again." As the sun dipped, Kennedy visited a few more homes. A widow fretting over health care costs, a young dad laid off from the mill, each story etching deeper into his resolve. Word of these visits trickled out not from press releases, but from the folks themselves. Leroy posting a blurry photo on his phone, captioning it, "Senator Kennedy showed up, no cameras, just heart." Ms. Harper shared a video snippet, her voice cracking as she said, "He listened like we matter." Those posts went viral, raw and unpolished, contrasting sharp with Newsom's polished rebuttals. Shares multiplied, comments flooding in. "This is real leadership. Wish my reps did this." Back in California, Newsom doubled down at another briefing, jabbing at Kennedy as a relic from the bayou, out of step with modern America. His outdated views won't fix anything. He's all talk, no action. But his words landed flat, drowned out by the growing chorus online. A single mom in LA tweeted, "Newsom calls it complaining. Kennedy calls it reality, and he's out there proving it." Veterans groups amplified Leroy's story, saying, "This is leadership, boots on the ground, not podium pounding." The contrast stung. Newsom's team watched helplessly as approval numbers cratered, further donors hesitating on calls. In quiet corners, even Newsom's allies murmured doubts. Why attack when Kennedy's just helping folks? By evening, Kennedy's humble visits had overshadowed the governor's bluster images of him on those porches, spreading like wildfire, touching hearts far beyond Louisiana. A widow in Texas messaged her friends, "Seeing Kennedy, sit with that vet. That's what we need, someone who shares the load, not shifts the blame." Churches buzzed with discussions, pastors using the clips in sermons. True service ain't loud, it's steady. Newsom's clip about complaining backfired spectacularly, fueling petitions and op-eds, calling him disconnected. One editorial in a major paper read, "While Newsom defends his dreams, Kennedy defends the dreamers." The senator, wrapping up his day, ignored the glowing phone notifications, focusing instead on drafting notes for follow-up legislation. "This ain't about me," he told his aide over coffee. "It's about them, the ones carrying the weight." As night fell, America pondered the divide, one man chasing spotlights, the other kindling hope in the shadows. And in that quiet power, questions arose. Is Newsom's fire just smoke, while Kennedy's warmth is the real light? The ripple grew, folks sharing how Kennedy's actions made them feel seen, while Newsom's words pushed them away. A teacher in Ohio emailed her network, "Watch this." Kennedy didn't just talk, he walked it. Social feeds filled with testimonials from farmers to nurses, echoing the sentiment, "He's genuine." Newsom's attempts to pivot fell short, his arrogance laid bare against Kennedy's humility. By midnight, the narrative had shifted irrevocably, Kennedy's heart speaking louder than any microphone, leaving Newsom's efforts dimmed in the glow of true connection. The stories kept pouring in. A nurse in New York posting about how Kennedy's visit reminded her of her own struggles, a mechanic in Michigan saying, "He's fighting for us little guys." The momentum built undeniable as Kennedy's quiet deeds amplified the doubts about Newsom's sincerity, turning the clash into a nationwide conversation on what true leading means. The storm around Gavin Newsom intensified, whipping into a frenzy that stripped away layers of his carefully crafted facade. In a last-ditch effort to stem the bleeding, his campaign threw together a rally in the heart of San Francisco, a city that had long been his stronghold, where progressive banners once waved like victory flags. The stage was elaborate lights, glaring sound system booming, but the turnout was pitiful, a scattering of die-hard supporters mixed with curious onlookers and outright protesters. Signs pierced the air. Fix California. First stop the complaints. Start the solutions, and we're suffering, not dreaming. Newsom emerged from backstage, his suit impeccable, his grin forced like a mask, cracking at the edges. He gripped the podium, voice booming over the speakers. "This is nothing but a smear campaign," he proclaimed, pointing accusatorily into the crowd. "Kennedy's just a swamp-dwelling relic peddling fairy tales from Louisiana, while I build a bold future for all Californians." But the response was tepid. At best, murmurs rippled through the gathering, then shouts erupted. A middle-aged woman near the front yelled, "What about our power outages? Our skyrocketing rents?" A young man in the back hollered, "You talk 2028, but we can't afford tomorrow." Newsom's eyes darted his script, abandoned as he snapped back. "You're not seeing the full vision. Complaints won't change anything." The crowd gasped, then booed, the sound swelling like a wave crashing against his resolve. A viral video captured it all. Newsom's flustered retort, the signs waving wildly, his face reddening under the lights, and it detonated online, shared millions of times with captions like "Newsom versus his own people," and the fall begins. Hashtags, "Newsom crumbles" and "Out California cries" trended, flooded with personal stories, photos of eviction notices, videos of homeless encampments, screenshots of unaffordable utility bills. A firefighter from LA posted, "I've battled blazes, while Newsom battles reality enough." Polls nosedived overnight, his approval in California hitting rock bottom, with even core Democrats whispering, "He's lost the plot." In the governor's mansion, advisors paced like caged animals, screens glowing with bad news. "This rally backfired big time," one said. Newsom glared, slamming a door. "I'll drag Kennedy down with me. He's a fraud, all heartstrings and no substance." But each attack only amplified his isolation, his 2028 ambitions crumbling like sandcastles under high tide, buried beneath the avalanche of public disillusionment. Across the miles, John Kennedy remained a study. In contrast, his days filled not with rallies or rebuttals, but with the quiet rhythm of service. He journeyed to a modest community center deep in Louisiana's backcountry, where recent floods had left scars on the land and its people. The building was simple peeling paint, mismatched chairs, but it buzzed with locals, families huddled together, veterans with folded arms, teachers clutching coffee cups. Kennedy arrived without pomp, rolling up his sleeves, shaking hands like he was greeting kin at a family reunion. He sat among them, no stage, just eye level, as a mother named Tanya rose, her voice trembling with the weight of loss. My home's gone washed away, and the aid, it's tangled in red tape. My kids sleep on friends' floors. Kennedy leaned forward, notebook in lap, his drawl gentle as a summer rain. Tell me everything, Tanya, I'm listening. She did, spilling stories of bureaucracy's cold grip of nights wondering if tomorrow would bring relief. He jotted notes, asking thoughtful questions. What's the biggest barrier right now? How can we cut through it? When she finished, he placed a hand on her shoulder. You're strong as oaks. We'll get that help. Flowing, I promise. Tanya's tears fell, and she hugged him, whispering, You make me feel seen. Nearby, an elderly veteran named Clarence stood, his cane tapping the floor. Healthcare costs are eating me alive, pills I need but can't afford. Kennedy nodded, eyes locking on his. You've given enough for this country. It's time we give back. We'll push for those reforms. The room watched, hearts stirring, as Clarence shook his hand, voice cracking. First time a suit didn't just talk at me. Word leaked out organically, a attendee's video of Kennedy consoling Tanya, captioned, No cameras, no crowds, just real care. Another clip showed him deep in conversation with Clarence, posted as, This is what leaders do, listen and lift. The posts erupted online views, climbing into the tens of millions, shared with comments like, Kennedy's, the antidote to politics, and while Newsom rants, he restores. A single parent in Texas wrote, Seeing this. It's hope in action. Teachers across states emailed colleagues. Use this in class, show kids what integrity looks like. In California, Newsom's spiral accelerated. He booked a prime-time interview hoping to pivot and project strength. The studio was sleek, the host sharp-eyed. Governor, the host pressed, your own voters are turning. How do you address claims you're more focused on 2028 than California's crises? Newsom shifted his smile tight. That's Kennedy's spin. He's a outdated voice from the bayou twisting facts. California's on the rise, but naysayers love to complain and distract. The backlash was immediate, the word complain igniting a firestorm. Viewers at home recoiled, social media erupting with #not, complaining stories, a nurse posting her overtime shifts to pay rent, a farmer sharing drought-devastated fields. Headlines blared, Newsom's gaffe dismisses struggles as wines and governors disconnect doom's bid. Even friendly outlets critiqued one op-ed reading, Newsom's arrogance blinds him to the pain Kennedy highlights. His team went into damage control overdrive, but events where axed donors fled allies distanced themselves with vague statements. In a Bakersfield coffee shop, locals replayed the interview, one man sighing, He's out of touch, Kennedy's in tune. A woman nodded, tears in her eyes. He came to California, listened. Newsom won't even hear us here. Kennedy pressed on, undaunted. He visited a children's hospital in Louisiana, corridors echoing with beeps and whispers. Room by room he went, no entourage, just quiet presence. In one, a boy named Theo, fighting illness, sat with his worried parents. They spoke of bills stacking like mountains, fears of losing everything. Kennedy knelt, smiling at Theo. You're a warrior, son, braver than most. Turning to the parents, he said, We'll fight for that coverage. You're not alone. Theo handed him a drawing, a stick-figure senator with a big heart. For you, he mumbled. Kennedy tucked it away, eyes misting. Means the world, buddy. A nurse's discreet photo hit the web, Kennedy hugging Theo, captioned, "Leadership with Soul." It went mega-viral, shared by millions, comments pouring in. The Yuan's gold, Newsome could learn from him. Pastors wove it into sermons. In humility, we find strength. Schools discussed it. Kids inspired to write letters. Dear Senator Kennedy, you're my hero because you care. The senator read them all, each one fueling his fire. As dusk fell, Kennedy attended a small gathering at a Louisiana farm co-op where workers shared tales of economic squeezes, rising costs, shrinking margins. A farmer named Rita stood voice steady. We're barely hanging on. Politicians promise, but forget. Kennedy listened, asking what change would help most. She outlined needs, subsidies, fair trade, and he noted them, promising advocacy. I won't let this slide, he said. Rita smiled faintly. You already haven't. A bystander's video captured the exchange, spreading like seeds in wind, with captions like, Kennedy actions over ambition. The nation contrasted it with Newsom's floundering, his interviews. Chaotic words, tangled confidence eroded. In Sacramento, Newsom's circle, fractured whispers of resignation circling. He appeared in one last briefing voice, wavering eyes, darting, but America had tuned out. Kennedy, meanwhile, grew in stature, his humility a magnet drawing admiration. A viral thread compiled his visits. From vets to kids, he's there. Even Californians posted, We need a Kennedy here. The chapter closed on Newsom's unraveling, disheveled defensive, while Kennedy shone brighter, a symbol of compassionate resolve, beloved for choosing people over power. The clash had exposed truths, and in Kennedy's quiet grace, America found a leader worth following, his light eclipsing Newsom's fading star. The dust had settled, but the echoes of the clash reverberated across America, leaving Gavin Newsom a diminished figure, his once lustrous ambitions for 2028 reduced to a cautionary whisper in political circles. His rallies, once vibrant with cheering crowds, were now cancelled or sparsely attended. His donor calls unanswered. His headlines, brutal, Newsom's fall. A star, extinguished, and governor's ego outpaces his leadership. In Sacramento, the governor's mansion felt like a fortress under siege, lights burning late. As advisors traded hushed fears, their charts painting a grim picture of plummeting support. Even in California's bluest corners, murmurs grew, He's lost us. He's chasing dreams while we're drowning. Newsome, pale and pacing, insisted to his team, They'll come back. I'm the future, not some folksy relic like Kennedy. But his voice lacked conviction. His 2028 boasts now a fading memory, overshadowed by a nation turning its gaze to John Kennedy, a senator whose quiet strength had become a beacon of hope. Polls reflected it. Kennedy's approval soared not just in Louisiana, but across states with independents, and even disillusioned Democrats, nodding in admiration. Letters flooded his office, not only from his home state, but from California, where former Newsom supporters wrote, You see our struggles, when he won't. Yet Kennedy shunned the spotlight, waving off calls for interviews or victory laps. Instead, he made a bold move. He flew to California, landing in a fire-ravaged town near Fresno, where he'd arranged a community meeting open to all, especially those who'd once backed Newsom, those feeling forgotten in the governor's shadow. No press, no fanfare, just a simple hall, announced through local flyers packed with weary faces, single parents, veterans, teachers, small business owners, their eyes heavy with the weight of unmet promises. Kennedy stood at the front. No podium, just a folding table. His Louisiana drawl warm as a hearth fire. "I'm not here to crow or campaign," he said, voice steady. "I'm here to hear you, to understand how we can make things right together." The room leaned in tentative at first, then open. A woman named Maria, a former Newsome voter who'd lost her shop to rising costs, stood, her voice raw. "I trusted him, but he's left us with nothing. Bills, we can't pay, streets, we can't walk safely. What can you do?" Kennedy met her gaze, notebook open. "Tell me your story." "Maria, I'm all ears." She spoke of shuttered businesses, families squeezed by rent, dreams deferred by bureaucracy. He jotted every detail, asking, "What's the one thing that'd help most right now?" Maria paused, then said, "Someone who fights for us, not themselves." Kennedy nodded, promising to push for small business aid and safer neighborhoods. "You're not alone," he said, and Maria's eyes welled, a faint smile breaking through. Others rose, a veteran named Javier. His benefits delayed for years. A teacher, Lena, struggling with overcrowded classrooms. A young mother worried about her kids' safety. Kennedy listened without interrupting his questions, showing he'd read their letters, knew their pain. "Leadership ain't about headlines or fancy titles," he said as the stories slowed. "It's about standing in your shoes, carrying your burdens, and getting to work. We'll fight for housing, for veterans' care, for schools that lift our kids, not for applause, but because it's right." The room stilled, then applause rose, not loud, but deep, like a heartbeat shared. Attendees filmed it on their phones, posting clips of Kennedy hugging Maria, nodding to Javier, captioned, "He came to us, no ego, just heart." The videos went viral, racking up millions of views, with comments flooding in Kennedy's "the leader we've been starving for." He's rebuilding trust, one person at a time. Social media became a tapestry of gratitude, weaving stories from across the nation. A nurse in Georgia posted, "Kennedy's visit to California shows he cares about all of us, not just his state." A mechanic in Michigan wrote, "He's not chasing power, he's chasing solutions." Teachers shared the Fresno clips in classrooms, sparking discussions on civics. This is what integrity looks like. Churches wove Kennedy's example into sermons, pastors saying, "In a world of loud ambition, be the quiet hand that heals." Congregations wept not from despair, but from a renewed belief in leadership that serves. Letters poured into Kennedy's office, one from a California teacher reading, "Dear Senator, your words gave me hope. Thank you for showing us leadership isn't about self, but service." Another, from a veteran in Texas, said, "You're the voice of the forgotten. I salute you." Kennedy read each one, tucking them into his worn folder, his resolve deepening. He told an aide, "This ain't about me, it's about keeping faith with these folks." But America saw him differently. A symbol of what leadership could be, a man who didn't need a stage to shine. Newsom, meanwhile, faded further into irrelevance. One last interview attempt backfired, his defensive tone alienating even friendly outlets. Asked why Californians felt abandoned, he snapped Kennedy's manipulating emotions. "California's stronger than ever." The clip spread, paired with images of homeless encampments and fire-damaged towns. The contrast damning. Headlines read, "Newsom's denial, the end of a dream," and Governor's words ring hollow. His team now fractured, canceled appearances, donors pulling back like tide from shore. In a Sacramento diner, locals watched the replay, one saying, "He's lost us Kennedys, the one who gets it." Across the country, the narrative solidified. Newsom's hubris had undone him, while Kennedy's humility lifted him. Social media amplified it, memes showing Newsom's empty podium beside Kennedy's folder of letters captioned, "One seeks glory, the other gives grace. Even in California, voices shifted. A college student in San Diego posting Newsome dreams of power. Kennedy dreams of people. The lesson of the clash crystallized profound and clear. True leadership isn't born in grand speeches or personal ambition. It's forged in empathy, action, and an unwavering commitment to the overlooked. Kennedy taught this through every quiet visit, every handwritten note, every promise kept. He showed that a leader's strength lies not in dominating debates, but in standing shoulder to shoulder with those who struggle, listening without agenda, acting without fanfare. His example challenged all politicians, parents, citizens to prioritize service over self, to bridge divides with compassion, to rebuild trust through deeds, not words. In Fresno's hall, as the meeting wound down, a girl named Mia, no older than 9, approached Kennedy, clutching a folded drawing. "It's you," she said shyly, handing over a sketch of a smiling man with a big heart labeled Helper. "You make my mom smile again," she added. Kennedy knelt, his eyes soft, and hugged her gently. "This is why I'm here, Mia folks, like you and your mom." A parent's photo of the moment hit the internet, captioned, "Leadership Lives in Love." It went viral, shared by millions with comments like, "This is our America," and "Kennedy's heart is our hope." The nation, moved to tears, saw in that embrace a truth. Leadership isn't about climbing ladders, it's about lifting others. Kennedy rose, tucking Mia's drawing into his pocket, his mission clearer than ever. America watched, believing again in a future where leaders listen, serve, and heal, proving that in a fractured world, empathy is the strongest bridge of all.